All right, we're going to revisit a question. Linda, who's following us on Facebook, she has on the subject of death, going back to, why do some people live longer than others? God knows the number of days, but but I'm not sure he's the one that takes people out. Doesn't Satan take people out as well, or as just a result of a fallen world? If God takes people out who are in danger of falling away, wouldn't he take us all out? And so, kind of a
And again, you're making some good points, Linda. But again, here's the deal. I don't know. I've known people like I was talking about. My friend Fernando, who I believe was taken out by the Lord, and I could see the reasons behind it. But then I've known other people who've backslid and walked away from the Lord, and God doesn't do that with them. And so, again, I have no answer for that. It's not like you go through the Bible and God's got a specific plan for the death of every person, and He lets us know exactly what it is. As far as Satan doing things on the planet, Satan is allowed. Satan, even though we have situations where, again, you're talking about things like being the result of a fallen world. For example, we have disease that takes place, and we have accidents that take place, and we have situations where you get attacked by an animal and that kind of thing, or even you're murdered. In the context of Christians, Matthew chapter 16, Jesus speaks about these signs are going to follow believers. They'll speak with new tongues, and if they take anything deadly, it won't harm them. If they take up a serpent, it won't harm them. They'll lay hands on the sick and they'll recover, and so on. And so you have a promise there of the protection of God. And so when I look at the situations that are taking place on the earth, you can attribute things to Satan. Yes, Satan wants to kill people. And so, for example, in the book of Job, Satan killed Job's whole family except for his wife and him. And so Job's whole family is gone. Job's servants, most of his servants are taken out. And most of his livestock, all of his livestock is taken out in a situation. And yes, Satan did it, but before Satan can do it, Satan had to go before God, and Satan had to have permission. And so when we look at the story of Job, you can obviously see what God's doing with Job, and it's because he's the center of the whole narrative. But what was God doing with Job's kids? And what was God doing with the servants of Job? What was He doing with them? And in each one of those cases, you don't want to take away the sovereignty of God. When God is allowing, specifically in that situation, all these things to take place, He knows exactly what Satan's going to do. He knows who he's going to do it with. And He's got a purpose and a plan for each life that is there. And so that doesn't just include Christians, that includes non-Christians. God has purposes and plans for non-Christians too. There's not anybody that He doesn't want. And so 2 Peter chapter 3 talks about God's not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. I think that one of the reasons that some of the people that I have known that were the rankest heathens were so long-lived is because God knew that this was the only life that they were going to have. And so he was giving them grace and opportunities to come to Christ for as long as possible. Other times he may allow people to be taken out, including by Satan. And again, your point's well taken, because you do have that in the book of Job. He can allow other people to be taken out by Satan, whether Christians or non-Christians, especially when you're talking about non-Christians. And I think that He does that many times to protect other people. And so you see that in the case of Ahab, you see that in the case of Jezebel. God predicts their deaths. And I have no doubt that Satan was involved in that whole thing. But again, it's God who's sovereign over these things. And so even though Satan does things, the earth is the Lord's and all the fullness thereof. And so God's always got a purpose, even behind the things that Satan is allowed to do. And he's the one who's ultimately in control. In a passage in the book of Isaiah, he says, I'm the Lord, I create evil and I create good. And it's the idea of God taking accountability, taking responsibility for everything that goes on the planet. And so, again, ultimately, we can generally see what God's doing in a situation, and he is acting in grace. But God takes credit for everything.